That's right. Hello and welcome to the CFB Super Show, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and I am joined by my co-host and partner in crime in these college football streets, my man Jake Kucheck, dropping that new intro. Before we get into it, man, that was awesome. I hope you liked that, Jake, because I was excited for you to see that one, and everybody else.
That was pretty cool. I'm hyped. I didn't get a sneak preview or anything, so I'm catching that live with everybody else, and that was great.
Yeah, for sure. New year, new show, new intro. We're doing it. All right, so we're going to be breaking it down. This is the flagship show that we do every Thursday night at 9 p.m. PST, breaking down the main CFB DFS slate. Also talking about PrizePicks. We're going to do some underdog stuff this year and any betting opportunities that we like. We'll also be talking about those. Anybody watching live on demand or on YouTube and Twitter/X, make sure you're dropping those comments, questions, concerns. We'll answer those as we go. And I'll check on Twitter as well. We're getting a lot more viewers on the Twitter machine since we've branched out that way. And we have lots of other fun things planned, such as our playback channel, which we're working that out to maybe watch some games with you guys this season. Also, we'll have some cool stuff like projections in CFB. We'll take a couple of weeks there, but lots of content coming your way. I'm extremely excited. We have done a summer of previews, conference previews, transfer portal talk, but alas, it is here. We're going to get into week 0. Maybe not as exciting of a week 0 as it was last year with a few more games and a really kind of a staunch play that we were on, but still some nice spots to look at here on the 3-game slate. There's also going to be a game later on in the evening, Hawaii versus Delaware State, a battle of opposite coasts. Not on the slate there. There is talk of a potential showdown slate if it's not up yet. Maybe talk about that a little bit, but for now, we're going to do our tried and true method, breaking it down game by game. But before we get into that, I've been doing this solo all summer long. Jake, I know you've been doing your thing in the baseball streets. How have you been? What's been up this summer? And are you ready to have our best season yet in college football?
Yeah, man. Big things ahead. Had a big summer of yes, the baseball stuff, got all that done. Also, just moved into a new house like a week and a half ago. So if you see some boxes or something behind me, we're still getting settled in. And oldest daughter just started elementary school. So
Nice.
a lot of life change happening all at once. But we are definitely ready to get into some college football. And I don't know what you're talking about. This is a great slate. It's 3 games. and maybe some people haven't heard of some of the teams on the slate, but you know what? We're going to get after it. We're going to let you guys know what's up. And maybe we'll find that Nash equilibrium of a pick while we're talking this through.
For sure. I was going to say your background looked a little bit different there. So congrats on moving into the new place. That's always exciting. We got to make some money this year for each other. I don't need a washer and dryer this year, but maybe some other appliances, and we'll see if we can get you an AC finally. Or
yeah, we need everything. We have we have like a couch and a kitchen table. And that's about it. We gotta finish moving in. So I'll take it all.
Awesome. All right. Starting us off, we're going to get into this 3-gamer. Now, we're going to talk primarily from a DraftKings perspective, but we'll also mention some of the FanDuel stuff as well, or any pricing discrepancies. That'll be more so as we go through into weeks 1 through forever. So this week, not as much, but of course, there is the Saturday morning show as well, live 1 hour before lock. Question and answer time there. So any FanDuel stuff that we didn't cover tonight, I will certainly cover Saturday morning before slate lock. All right, we're going to start off with Florida State versus Georgia Tech. As of now, it's a 10.5 point spread in favor of the Seminoles, 55.5 total. And this game, of course, takes place in Dublin, Ireland. Pretty fun there. Who will have the luck of the Irish? I had to be corny about this one, but who are you liking this one? There's some really nice DFS relevant names in this game, but some new pecking orders that we're going to have to figure out as well. It seems like a lot of the industry, not just DFS, but the media in general, is very high on Florida State this year. I think Georgia Tech may have a little bit of a chance here to at least keep it close. Who are you liking in this one?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the battle of mediocre continuity with Georgia Tech versus elite mercenaries in Florida State, right? And so I think especially it being a week 0 game, half the world away, the team that is better bonded and knows each other better and has better team chemistry, I think is going to have a little bit of an advantage just from if things aren't working right away, they're not going to get frustrated. They're going to kind of know how each other work. And just from a psychological perspective, I like how things will shake out for Georgia Tech. That said, there's a pretty large talent gap, right? And so that's why we see the spread the way that it is. I think, if I have to go to it and call it right now and play the game out in my head, I think Florida State ultimately ends up victorious but doesn't cover. I could see this being like a 6-point game where Florida State has to play some defense to prevent a late score from making it an even closer game. I don't think Florida State runs away with this one. I think we get some better energy early out of Tech, and I think Florida State comes out a little bit flat. And I think eventually talent wins out, but it'll be a closer game than the spread might indicate.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And there's this Tech, like, continuity is a thing I talked about all summer. I'm really big on that because with the transfer portal era in both college sports, basketball and football, I know there's many others, but the two primary ones, there's going to be a lot of figuring out, who can play with who, what kind of chemistry can be built, picking order, and all of those things. So the teams with the continuity are already ahead of the game, and that's going to, I think, account for things a lot more. And I think this year is going to provide an edge as people look to the more talented groups without really realizing a team like Georgia Tech, they all have played with each other in the past. That's going to count for something. Looking at the quarterback situation here, Haynes King definitely looks like the play that I want to be involved in. Only 7.1K. When I look at early ownership, he's in the middle of the pack. I mean, there's only a couple of quarterbacks that we can really choose from, right? But definitely like King here. Has the rushing upside, really defined role. They want to have him passing the football more. They kind of started out with a dumbed down playbook early last season, and they started to add more and more things as it went. Said he made some mistakes, wants to get past that, and throughout training camp and the offseason, he has done a very good job. Has a plethora of great receivers, looking like Eric Singleton's going to be that WR1. Malik Rutherford, also a name that you want to know. That's the 1 and 2 punch there. And then, of course, Chase Lane, who has SEC experience, was injured for most of last year and has a ton of talent as well. And then you have names like Leo Blackburn and Christian Leary, who have performed in the past as more of GPP options. But this is definitely a very solid receiver room that I'm very high on. And to me, I want King and maybe 1 to 2 of the Georgia Tech receivers, more so than I want Jamal Haynes, who at 6'3" is a very solid option as well. The way I think this game plays out a little bit is DJ Ua and Florida State. They're going to have a little bit of a befuddled feeling, I think, from the new defensive stuff that Georgia Tech's going to be rolling out there. And I think, like you said, coming out flat makes a lot of sense. And with that being said, I think Georgia Tech's going to have to strike fast early and often, whereas in the second half, I think they start to get wear down a little bit, and I do think the Seminoles end up winning. So I think first half-wise, we're going to see any Georgia Tech faders kind of feeling down about themselves because I feel like King has a chance to be one of the highest scoring players on the slate, and maybe that's different than the rest of the industry, but I'm usually on the opposite side of everybody else, more so than DJ Ua, who is priced up there at 9K. Florida State, a ton of new players. We just mentioned that. Who are some of the names that you'd be looking at here from a DFS perspective or that you're kind of zoning in on early on?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that jumped out at me was it was a little bit surprising to see Toafili priced above Roydell Williams. I know that we've had a lot of Toafili in our lives for a lot of years. I don't think he's ever been top man on the totem pole, even on his own team, let alone an entire slate. So that's a little bit interesting to see. I don't necessarily know that I'm going to believe we get 3 2-yard touchdowns from Toafili that would justify that price. I think that if we're gonna go with a running back, obviously Roydell Williams is kind of the one we expect more volume from, and then if he is unfortunate and falls over inside the 5, he's probably losing a touchdown. So that said, despite the spot, I'm not super excited about either of those guys. And I don't think it's the kind of game where he's going to run crazy and go for, 202 or 203. That's Roydell Williams. I certainly don't expect Toafili to go for 200 yards, maybe all season. But I think that there will be a lot of ownership on Roydell Williams because it's like, okay, well, he's just going to step into that spot, the Trey Benson role, and go for massive yardage. And he's talented, but this is an entirely new team, and this is a matchup that I don't think that they're going to just be completely dominant in. And so I think that going a different place than either of the Florida State running backs is already going to be pretty different on this slate, and that's something I'm going to be looking to do. So I won't say the same thing about SMU running backs, but we'll get there when we get there. So I also don't love the passing game. I don't know that they're going to do a lot of passing. I don't know that DJU is worth anywhere near 9K. I think that they're going to probably spread the ball out a decent amount. I don't know if you're a Malik Benson believer or not. I don't think I'm a Malik Benson believer at 7K. And, even if there's that same amount of talent as the receivers that they had in the past with Keon Coleman last year, which I don't think is true. I think that they will still spread it out more than a 7K price tag on any individual receiver warrants. So I'm pretty much off of the entire Florida State side, which is a weird thing to say. Like they're the most talented team on the slate, unless you think SMU is better. I don't really think that. I think Florida State is more talented. I just don't think for DFS purposes they do the things that I want them to do in terms of concentration of production, in terms of certainty of I guess a floor of production for their high volume guys. They don't really have high volume guys. Like we see an offense that's kind of herky jerky all day and makes you wish that you kind of left some players for some later games. So that's my take on the Florida State side. On the Tech side, a little bit different. I don't know if I'm as bold as you wanting to get to Haynes King, just because I have some other quarterbacks I'd like to get to, but I do like his receivers enough that that could make sense. Obviously, we're well familiar with what Singleton and Rutherford can do. I think probably Singleton is the way that I would lean. I think that 5,300 is too low. He is someone I'd be a little bit. I would think that 7K would be a little bit more warranted based on the production and explosion that we've seen from him in the past. I think if he's fully healthy and everything, and he can compete, he's got deep speed. He can, outrun most DBs, including Florida State DBs. So I think we're in alignment on the Tech side being more viable. I might not just be as aggressive as you on the Haynes King play, but I think you probably figured that.
Yeah, for sure. And ownership projections are going to be something it takes a few weeks to really kind of dial in on. But looking at it, outside of Brendan Lewis, who's going to be in the lowest owned quarterback, King is definitely on the back half of that, which automatically makes me somewhat interested knowing what kind of upside he has as well. But yeah, the FSU side, their prices are just extremely high, as you mentioned. Like Malik Benson has that Alabama pedigree, but he didn't really do much there. 7K to start off with is a little bit too pricey. Ja'Kai Douglas, the main returner there in the receiving room for Florida State, 5'6". That's a bit pricey. Jaylen Brown looks like he has the potential to be someone really good. Formerly was, pedigreed to LSU, only 4.8, maybe some GBP shares there. And then you have the starting tight end as Kyle Morlock, but again, not a lot of interest, although we know that DJ likes to include his tight ends, and Mr. Uyangalele certainly makes tight ends fantasy relevant. So I don't want to completely write off Morlock. If you're doing the MME thing, that makes some sense to me to get some exposure there. And then one name, and I agree with you entirely on the running game for Florida State. I think it's going to be very spread out throughout. Like a lot of people early on, I'm seeing a lot of Roydell Williams love, and that's going to be one of those probable fades for me where I'm like, dodging every touchdown that he gets. Toa Philly didn't play as well against Duke last year. The defensive coordinator for Georgia Tech now, he was at Duke last year. He gave this FSU team some problems with the defensive schemes that he threw at them. His name's Tyler Santucci, and Toa Philly was somebody that they used to kind of break things up a little bit. So I do think he'll get some work here, but that price point is egregious. And then one name that we kind of just have to mention because he is very talented and somebody that you liked last year when he was with Indiana is Jalen Lucas, who's there at 5-1. That would be a GBP extraordinaire, not necessary on this slate because prices are allowing us to kind of fit who we want. Lucas is slated to be one of the starting kick return, punt return type of guys, but he'll certainly get touches as well. Kind of a jack of all trades. He can catch the pass. He can run the ball. He's going to do a little bit of everything. As pricing gets tighter throughout the season, I think Lucas will be one of those guys where we're trying to eke out like a 4K touchdown from, but he's way too talented not to at least mention, especially in a game that's going to be, watched by the masses here early on. They're going to get him some touches, but mostly just a GPP look there in the Georgia Tech side with the pass catchers, the way that it sounds like we're both in agreement. All right, moving on to the next game, we have Montana State. Yes, the Bobcats of Montana State versus the New Mexico Lobos, totaling at about 54.5. Earlier, it was at minus 12.5 in favor of Montana State. I saw 13.5. It ballooned a little bit more on BK, and that started at like 9 or 10 way back when the lines first came out. So a lot of people on this Montana State train. It's pretty wild to see an FBS team, with a home game here and not favored. There is something to kind of set the tone here and set the table. New Mexico is kind of at ground zero, season zero, if you will, with Bronco Mendenhall. They're certainly not going to be a team that probably goes bowling. And if they do, it'll be, the minimum games won. This is kind of a rebuild, getting all the pieces together. Montana State, they are a team, capable of winning, in their side, a national title or being one of those Final Four teams. And they've been there consistently. So two programs on opposite ends, but I still can't get over the FCS versus FBS thing. And that line is just so large. I don't know how I don't bet New Mexico to cover. Maybe not win, but they got to cover at home. And I think they're live to win as well. So that was one of the featured bets in our free CFB Best Bets article that released earlier today. But I'm certainly a lot higher on New Mexico than I think the public is. Go figure. Do have to mention Montana State has a lot of changes. They've got injuries galore to their offensive line. I know we don't talk a lot about individual O-linemen, but it's necessary here. Justice Perkins, who is their top center, All-American caliber type player, not listed on the depth chart, dealing with some issues. Cole Sane moving over from guard to play center, and then multiple of their All-American tackles moving to guard and vice versa. So everybody's kind of shifting around that O-line, and you might say, well, that's not a huge deal that, tackle to guard, but that can be, and especially that center spot there where they won't have their normal guy in Perkins and moving to Sane. There might be some jitters. There might be some miscues, just something to be aware of. And then on top of that, their top running back, Julius Davis, will not be playing as well. So a lot of missing pieces there for Montana State that could trip them up a little bit. Worth mentioning. However, they have some absolute studs at some very low price. The options here are going to be very popular. Starting off, their quarterback, Tommy Mellott, he's going to be one of the highest owned quarterbacks on the slate. He can do a myriad of things, dual threat. Certainly a guy that you're going to want to look to as at least one of your quarterbacks, right? And then at running back, we're looking at the two cheaper options, Scott Trey Humphrey, who sits atop the depth chart now without Davis, and Adam Jones, who's expected to get plenty of work as well. And this is a Montana State team that loves to run the football. So just because Humphreys is starting doesn't mean he's going to sit there and get 30-plus carries, although it could happen. Jones is going to get work. We're also hearing that Elijah Elliott is going to get a little bit of work, and there's other players as well that are at least going to factor in. The nice thing is Humphrey's only 4.6, so he doesn't need 30 carries to pay off. Jones is only 4.4. I do believe you're going to see an astronomical, stratospheric-like ownership on Humphrey. Makes sense because of how cheap he is, and people are going to look to this Montana State team as a running squad. So he is your chalk lock type of play there at running back. And as somebody who is a proponent of playing 4 running backs, it would be silly of me not to include him in my main build. I'm not going to talk about the receivers. We'll jump to you for that in a second. Switching over to New Mexico at the other quarterback spot, and the player that I am the highest on. I'm pretty high on a dual threat like Haynes King, but Dampier from New Mexico, Devin Dampier, only 6.1K. Looking at some early guesstimations on ownership, he was coming in at like the 3rd quarterback. I don't think that'll be the case when we make it to lock on Saturday, because he should not be anywhere below 50% owned. If he is, it's a huge gift for all of us. He is going to be the absolute everything for this team. They had Dylan Hopkins there under center last year, very boring type of quarterback. Unfortunately, he had his moments, but when Dampier came in through parts of 9 games, he was astonishingly efficient, and he was a very big threat as a runner. Somebody who I think is going to put up some points, and he's going to definitely hit his ceiling here as a 6-1 price point. He should not be under 50%. I will repeat that once again. Also, being that he's a running quarterback, that certainly makes the running backs a little bit harder to get to. And especially when you look at the depth chart here for New Mexico and you see Eli Sanders, formerly of Iowa State, Nicorey Rogers, and Andrew Henry, who's the incumbent, all with "or" tags next to their name, which is kind of what I expected to happen, all of them to get carries. You're running GPP lineups, you can mix and match some here, put a one in your main lineup perhaps. I wouldn't recommend it personally. I think it's going to be a lot of 5 to 10 carries, kind of the SMU type of thing that you alluded to earlier. Rather just play Dampier and get the rushing upside from him, as well as some of the passing opportunity. So that's where I'm looking at here with the Montana State New Mexico game. Playing Malott with Dampier, I think, is what a lot of people will ultimately end up doing. And you're going to see a ton of Humphrey in there as well. The receivers, I believe, will be all below under 30% for say. So why don't you give me your take on this one and dive into maybe the receivers a little bit more if you're seeing anyone that stand up or stand out.
Yeah, man. Can we get Ja'Cory Krosky-Barrett back on this slate? That'd be great. I would love like a 35 carry back to just, plug in there. So yeah, I agree, man. When you said the Haynes King thing, I was like, that's interesting. I don't know how I'm going to get away from playing both quarterbacks in this game. Malott and Dampier just seems like such the perfect CFB DFS way to start things. Like two quarterbacks that are, mobile enough and extremely involved in everything the offense does in a game that I think remains competitive throughout. Even if the philosophy is to run the ball a little bit more, these quarterbacks do enough of the running that it's not like that takes them out of the game plan. And especially when we get near the goal line, might we see some quarterbacks call their own number in a game stylistically the way that this one is? I think we might. So yeah, I think that's kind of my base structure is to be using the 2 quarterbacks from this one. That said, I don't necessarily feel like I have to jam the receiver stacks in with it. It's, I guess if you want to go to like a McCullough and Medford pairing along with using each of those quarterbacks, could be a way to go. It's using a lot of spots from just this game to use, obviously we're gonna use the running back from Montana State, and then we're using both quarterbacks, and then if we use a receiver from each team too, it's just you better be really right about it. And I don't necessarily think that stylistically this is the game that's going to blow up through receivers. I think it'll be through the mobility of the quarterbacks and along with some passing, but that alongside the rushing games. And so I think if I'm going to go with a receiver, probably McCullough is the one that I'm most leaning towards, and seems to have kind of the most history and chemistry. We don't know who Dampier really has chemistry with at this point. It's more of and it may be that his best chemistry is himself, right? And so I don't necessarily want to allocate a receiver spot on that side of it. So I think we're going with like a 3-man Montana State build. And then with Dampier bringing it back, and we'll find some receivers in the other games.
Yeah, and one player to mention maybe as a GPP look, I'd be remiss if I didn't, at receiver, Lanyetta Alexander, who spent time with ASU a long time ago. We don't care about that, but he spent the entire 2022 season with the world-famous Washington Huskies. He is the starting receiver for them at 4.2K and expected to be one of their primary targets. Super fast. You mentioned McCulloch. He's also, one of the more known commodities. So those are two guys that you certainly want to look to in any, stacks that you might be looking at with Malott. All right. Receivers is tough for this one, man. Moving into the next game, SMU, Nevada, and you look at the receivers on this slate, it's really kind of appearing that most of us are going to have the same group of running backs and within the 2 or 3 quarterbacks. Where the slate's going to be won is at wide receiver. And if you're loving to play roulette, perhaps, then this SMU team is going to be for you, because they absolutely love to run multiple receivers, and on their depth chart, or tags are everywhere. Looking at the initial or what the current line is, 24.5 in favor of SMU, total of 55.5. That was up around 58 to start, and that was one of our CFB betting team's primary bets, the under 57.5. That's now down to 55.5. So hopefully you guys got a chance to jump on that early. This looks like a game that SMU, and my bet for this one is SMU first half minus 13.5. I think they're going to jump out quickly. And then I think in the second half, you're going to see them play some of their secondary guys and really start to grind down the game. Now, we know that Preston Stone doing some cleanup here on the depth chart. We know Preston Stone's going to start at quarterback. No surprise there. But we're also getting the reports that backup Kevin Jennings is going to get time. Now, does that mean in the second half, like this is a damn preseason game? Perhaps. Or does that mean he's going to come in and get some series back to back? I don't think it'll be an alternating series situation. That would be rough. But we definitely want to stay away in our main lineup from that whole quarterback situation for sure. At running back, it's Brashard Smith, or LJ Johnson, or Jalen Knighton. No surprise there. All three will get work. Our man, Kamar Wheaton, went through some knee injuries. He had knee surgery recently. He's out for the year. So Kamar Wheaton's season that we have been calling for the last 2 years, we'll have to wait one more time. Interesting note about Rashard Smith. He's kind of listed as an ATH super athlete. Played some receiver at Miami, more of a running back. He played out of position at Miami. They're going to use him in a lot of situations here running the football, but he is going to be an absolute weapon for SMU. Then you look at their wide receiver depth chart, Jake Bailey or Roderick Daniels to be expected, Romillo Brinson or Jordan Hudson, Keyshawn Smith or Moochie Dixon. All 6 of those guys are going to play a lot. All 6 of them had 250 plus yards. That's just the way it's going to be. This SMU team, each week it's going to be someone different. And when you land on the right one, you're going to be feeling great. But it happens a lot where maybe you go with Roderick Daniels and then suddenly Romillo Brinson goes for 288 and 2 in the first quarter. And it's like, damn, that one hurt. Just be ready for that. If you're running multiple lineups, this is certainly going to be an area where I think GPPs are one. You're going to run a rotate through those various wideout options. At tight end, it's more clear. It's RJ Maryland, but that doesn't mean anything because he's going to have all his targets mixed in with all those other guys as well. At Nevada, I'm just going to run through the depth chart and then you give us the deep dive. Brennan Lewis is going to be the starting quarterback, the lowest projected owned quarterback for a reason. They do have former Nebraska transfer Chubba Purdy on deck, but he's coming back from an injury. He's not going to play. They're thinking it's going to take a couple of weeks. If Lewis falters early, you will see Purdy come in. At running back, Sean Dollars is the projected starter. He is playing through a minor ankle injury that he tweaked. Not expected to miss any time, but something to be aware of. His primary backup is Savion Red, who's dealing with turf toe, nagging type of injury. And then they do have Boston College transfer Pat Garwo, who was pretty profitable for us a season or two ago. He's not on the official depth chart. He is practicing full after missing most of the offseason with an injury of his own. Sounds like he may get a carry or two, nothing too serious. They're going to work him in over the next couple of games, and you'll see him play a lot more. So dollars is probably the back to own here, but those other options are looming. And then at wide receiver, your main three on the depth chart, Jaden Smith, who is being an absolute stud in offseason camps, Marcus Ballon, and Cortez Braham. They also have Nate Burleson II looming, a very fast potential superstar player, probably more so next year. His dad is Nate Burleson, go figure, just to remind you, as we're getting old. Guys that we used in DFS many years ago now have kids we're using in DFS. And then at tight end, you have Jace Henry, an Ivy League transfer, and actually a pretty stout option that's somewhat interesting. I think Lewis may lean on him quite a bit in this game, but that's the depth chart news. That's everything to know. Give us the deep dive on this one, Jake.
Yeah, man, you covered it pretty well. So I think I'm gonna take a little bit of an alternate view on RJ Maryland. Only got on the depth chart without nor by his name.
Right.
So he will. It's kind of like I don't know if you get into the Pro Bowl at all. Probably not. You're not really an NFL guy, but in the Pro Bowl, when there was a Pro Bowl in it's in a previous form, tight ends were always the nuts because there were only two of them. They never left the field. They didn't rotate the way everyone else seemed to rotate, and so that's kind of the way that I'm looking at it. And RJ Maryland has gone nuts in games against trash teams in the past. So I'm not saying he's a lock by any means. No receiver on this SMU side is a lock just because of how much they rotate. But I think I am going to be overly exposed to RJ Maryland for that reason. And big red zone target, and they will be in the red zone frequently. And if it's not going to go to a running back, and everyone is going to be very heavily on SMU running backs, I think it's probably more likely to go to Maryland than one of the outside receivers or like a slot guy like Moochie Dixon. So I don't know that it's even a contrarian take because he's probably going to be fairly popular. But however popular he'll be, I'm going to want more than that, right? If we have projections on RJ Maryland at 30%, I'm going to want 70%. Because you got to plant a flag somewhere, and you got to pick a receiver somewhere on this slate. You still have to play at least three of them. So I'm probably going there. As far as the running backs go, man, that's going to go a long way to deciding this one. And it's going to be interesting to see how they get the quarterbacks involved. I think both quarterbacks will have success regardless of, what that shakeout is. If it's 80-20, if we get like 3/4 of Preston Stone and then they turn it over and just hand off the rest of the time, it's like, well, that's not really a quarterback split or a quarterback controversy. That's like paying lip service to that, right? So I think regardless of who plays quarterback in the first half, the second half is going to be mainly running the ball. So we got to get early scores from RJ Maryland and then turn it over to the running game. And who do we think it will be in that, second half of the third quarter and all of the fourth quarter that gets those carries? I don't think it's going to be Jalen Knight. I think that we're further along the depth chart than that. I don't know, man. The Rashard Smith thing at 3,600, Rashard Smith is going to be extremely popular. I would think, right? And so if he hits, great. Okay, we didn't really gain much on the field in doing that. If he doesn't hit, our build is going to be extremely different if it doesn't include Rashard Smith, right? And so if all of those carries go to LJ Johnson, if all of those carries somehow stick with Jalen Knight, and if all those carries go to someone else that is also involved in the depth chart, or if the carries get split up a whole bunch. And what doesn't happen is we don't get like a quarter and a half of Brashard Smith milking the clock. I think that's great. I think that's a way that you can get ahead on a 3-game slate. And so I'm not even necessarily going to commit to another running back. Although if I had to, I think I'm going to commit to Jalen Knighton, right? I think he'll probably be the smoothest operator. Although last year, every time I committed to Jalen Knighton, didn't really work out for me. But new year, new outcomes, right? So I think that's probably the back that I'm going to go to on the SMU side, and I'll have RJ Maryland, as well. Probably not in the same lineup. Probably sprinkle those over different lineups. I'm not super excited about the Nevada side. We don't have competent quarterback play. If you're chasing a large spread, you want to have competent quarterback play. I think we get a lot of sacks. I think we get a lot of turnovers. I think we get a lot of time of possession for SMU. None of that makes me want to play anybody on Nevada. And so, my answer to pass catcher roulette is RJ Maryland. I would be willing to hear a counter argument for other pass catchers, but I think that's the strongest one for me. And then I will pair him or sprinkle him along with the non-Brashard running backs throughout different lineups is kind of my analysis of the deep dive.
Yeah. And, if you like, obviously we like Jalen Knighton. To me, just looking at it, we're going to be leaving salary on the table here, just talking some strategy stuff here. I don't think there's going to be a reason to use all of our salary this week. And just looking at it, normal weeks where we would, I think Brashard Smith and LJ Johnson would be the most popular running backs of that room, with Jalen Knighton being, slightly behind them. And I do think that will be the case this week, but with that additional salary, not that he's super expensive either, I think we could see, some pretty solid Knighton shares there up against maybe less than 30% ownership potentially on lineups that, don't force salary. So I think there's merit to just playing Knighton there in the first half. I just think that pace wise, SMU is going to be like just, dinking and dunking up and down the field. They're going to get some touchdowns early on, passing touchdowns. And then the second half, like you had mentioned, getting that second half rusher, which may be LJ Johnson, they're just going to be kind of, milking the clock there and sucking the life out of the building. And I think that there's going to be a lot less points there, and then it just favors the rusher. So I also feel like Smith is just too good of an athlete to pass up in a contrarian GPP lineup. It obviously makes sense, but with his price so low, it's just going to be really hard to get away from. So the way I'm looking at my build right now, I'm almost tempted to just use 2 SMU running backs, because I know that, there's a lot of them and they're all going to get carries, but at least I know I'm going to absorb a large portion of work there, and both should get enough to pay off there, whichever 2 that ends up being for me. Smith is going to be one of them, but then it's just do I want Knighton or Johnson? And looking at it initially, I think Smith and Johnson are going to be higher owned than Knighton, which definitely makes me more intrigued. And Knighton definitely has some pass catching ability and upside there that makes him a potential separator and high upside play. As far as the wide receivers go, RJ Maryland, we know that he doesn't have any competition there. So like I said, his targets are going to get lost with other players, but we know he's going to be on the field. And that's the main thing. There might be a Moochie Dixon long touchdown pass there. Maybe we see a bunch of PPR work for somebody like Roddy Daniels, as we've seen in the past. I personally think the most talented wide receiver in that group is Jake Bailey. I've been a huge Jake Bailey fan for quite some time. He moved from the Owls. He's had some health issues, priced at 6'3", the most expensive. Perhaps that gives us some lower rostership on him potential. But it's mostly just kind of plugging in, the one that maybe you personally like best, maybe even 2 if you want to run a GPP lineup and get some Preston Stone. But I don't know that they're going to have the floor to really act as your single entry, high dollar cash game type of play outside of, as you mentioned, RJ Maryland. And I think that leads to a lot of Singleton, Maryland, Rutherford type of lineups. Perhaps instead of Rutherford, we see somebody like a Ja'Kai Douglas if people feel they need to get some Florida State exposure. I don't know what Benson's ownership's going to be like yet. That's the one I'm most confused about, because I think people will plug him in because they have the salary, but that price just seems awful on the surface. So I'm really kind of, in your corner there with RJ Maryland, and heavier on the SMU running backs in terms of most of my lineups, at least the ones that matter, are going to have 2 of those running backs in my lineups. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. On the Nevada side, I do want some exposure to some of the Nevada receivers, because I think there's going to be obviously some opportunities, a lot of inefficient and low upside throws. So the target numbers might look really good at going into next week, but we'll have to see how much of those are actually catchable balls. But at 4.6, and they're all cheap, all sub 5K, but Jaden Smith looks like he's going to be like the clear-cut alpha in this receiver room. A lot of chatter. Say what you will about the way that this Nevada team shakes out. Yes, quarterback could be trouble unless Chuba Purdy gets healthy and becomes something. But this coaching staff is really good. I really am a believer in this staff. I think ultimately this Nevada program, they'll be able to make some noise. I think that they'll recruit well. They hit the transfer portal well. But this year is definitely going to be rough. But I think they'll be more competitive more often than people realize. But with that being said, when it comes to the DFS slate this week, I don't know that I can really get behind rostering any of them outside of some alt builds there, which I'll definitely have some. This is a good slate to try to get different and run some of those large field GPPs, because I think a lot of the groupthink and rehashed info over the next 36 hours is going to put a large portion of the industry on the same 4 to 5 plays as usual. So that's the 3-game slate. Core wise, I mean, why don't you give like 2 or 3 players you're really high on? I mean, everybody's going to be kind of, like I said, on the same core group of 4 or 5, but who are like 2 players that you're going to have in majority of your lineups? And then instead of giving us 3, give us 2 of those, and then 1 like off the wall play that you're looking at.
Okay. So I guess I will go with my chalk plays, if you will, as Dampier, Humphrey, and then as off the wall as you can get on this slate is probably RJ Maryland. Or at least for me. So if that counts as an off the wall play, I'll give you that one, RJ Maryland at receiver. It's hard to get off the wall on a 3-game slate with a lot of concentration and no price constraint. But at least I didn't throw Brashard Smith in there. So, that's off the wall in and of itself.
For sure. Yeah. And like I said, even looking at the group of receivers now, where that's looking like the best opportunity to get different. And I'm starting to see a very shrunken player pool there, where the same 4 or 5 guys are going to be in a lot of our opponents' lineups. Yeah, I love Dampier. I think the big decision point for me will be Malott, who's going to be very popular, versus Haynes King. And that'll be, basically same price point. If I'm wrong about King doing anything and the Malott chalk just crushes me a couple of hours later, that might be, but that's kind of the one point where I'm looking at King possibly over Malott, because I like Dampier too much. Haven't quite decided just yet, but I guess King will be kind of maybe more my less popular play there. And then at the running back spot there, just, 2 SMU running backs. I don't need to name them, but I think 2 of them have to be considered in the core.
If you go King, you have to go both Rutherford and Singleton.
That's kind of the plan. Yeah. So the lineup that as you're talking, I'm kind of playing around with lineups. I do that all the time. And the King lineup has 2 Georgia Tech receivers. It also leaves like $6,000 because there's just nowhere to spend the salary.
There's nowhere to spend it. Yeah.
The lineup of RJ Maryland, Eric Singleton, and Malik Rutherford actually looks really good. And the PPR points for those 3 could be really, really high. And if I'm right about King, it's kind of like, getting way out in front early on and making everybody chase you down. So I don't know. We'll see how much over the next 24, 36 hours the ownership projections change, what people are talking about. But yeah, I'm really feeling King here, man. I feel like Georgia Tech's going to make some noise, but we'll see.
This would have been a perfect slate to try to get to like a Penix and Roma Dunze stack, because we would have saved all the money and we would have been able to afford that stack we were trying to afford all last year.
right? And we'll have to take this slate like and probably the next two and feel like, okay, we can make our lineups, put whoever we want. Because after about week 4, week 5, we're going to be begging for value. And that's where we're going to be pulling our Jalen Lucas plays out of the ashes. All right. So let's go over and talk a little bit about some prize picks and underdog stuff. I did a underdog draft or two. They do have best ball, which kind of happened late into the summer. Plan on having some best ball content next year. Talked about that on the last show, but looking at some of their pick 'em type plays and prize picks. If you got a chance to look at prize picks or underdogs, I have two that I'm looking at underdogs right now. One being Eric Singleton over 56.5 receiving yards. I feel like he's kind of just like one of those locks for 75 to 80 at minimum, and obviously a threat for 100. So I'm hitting that over for him. And then coming down here, let's see. All right. It is Brendan Lewis. Passing is going to be hard to come by. I actually think that the backup they have, the other backup, I think it's Blanco. I think he's going to end up seeing time. So I have the under 141 passing yards for Brendan Lewis, which is already very low. But I have really no anticipation or worry about Lewis throwing for like 200 plus, 150 plus. I think it's going to be a really tough afternoon for him. And I think they actually turn things over to their backup, who's currently listed as AJ Bianco, and let him do some things. So we'll see what happens there. But those are the two I'm looking at underdogs. Do you have a chance to pull some prize picks or underdogs? If you have any of those, now's the time to fire away.
Yeah. So I'll start over on underdog. And the numbers are pretty consistent. There's not a lot of opportunity for arbitrage, at least that I've seen. But as into RJ Maryland as I am, I think 45.5 receiving yards is probably a little bit too low. And they actually, he has the highest projection. Nobody has a projection more than 50 yards on SMU, which is kind of ridiculous for a team that's like that much of a favorite. Like, you don't think one guy is going to get 65 yards? Like, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, so I have RJ Maryland's over 45.5. I think he's the same, if not very close. Yeah, he's exactly the same over on PrizePicks. So either of those sites, RJ Maryland over 45.5. And then let's see, the other one, which comes with the territory of not liking the Florida State side in general, not liking the passing game specifically, not liking Malik Benson as he pertains to the passing game even more specifically. I'll take the under on both PrizePicks at 60.5 and underdog at 59.5. To kind of correspond to the same, theory that we are using in DFS, which is Florida State is kind of herky-jerky, doesn't figure it out, and Malik Benson's not very good.
Sure. All right, so we'll jump over to prize picks. Haynes King over 1.5. We're going to this, and you've had past success in past years on this category, the pass rush, reception, touchdowns, over 1.5. I think he rushes one in as well as throws for 2, not just 1. So I think he clears that 1.5 touchdown threshold pretty easily. Feel very comfortable with him there. And then also Haynes King, I'm really pushing that. I don't know if this is my Nick Nash moment. I don't feel like it is, but we'll see. Over 238.5 pass plus rushing yards. I think he has a really solid afternoon, and people kind of, with no other game on and most of the eyeballs in the sports world on that game and a lot of social media, I think Haynes King is going to get his moment in the sun there to shine. So we'll see how that works out. But I'm on those two props for Haynes King. What do you got for us?
We'll stay in that same category. Actually, I'm going to take DJU under 259.5 pass plus rush. I think I don't know that we get many rush yards from DJU. I don't think they're going to send him out, and I think he might get sacked once or twice, and that would negate whatever rushing upside he had. I think, he's going to be mainly handing off, and I don't think that they're going to be playing from a large deficit. So I think under 225, 230 would have also been comfortable. I think 259 is a gift. So DJU under 259.5 pass plus rush yards. And then let's see. Jalen Knighton over 63.5 rushing yards. I think they ride him in the first half and he gets to like 85. Maybe a touchdown, hopefully a touchdown for the DFS lineups I have. But over 63.5 for 2 quarters of Jalen Knighton feels pretty comfortable.
Love it. Yeah, definitely. And then a couple of props looking at over here on DraftKings, kind of sticking with that. They have alt lines here as well, but Knighton 80 plus at plus 170, 70 plus at plus 110, and 65 plus at minus 120. So I'm feeling like the 70 plus yards feels pretty good there for Knighton and getting plus money. And then you come over to LJ Johnson, who, it sounds like maybe we're both in agreement that he's going to get, a decent chunk in the second half or intermittently, 60 plus rushing yards for him at plus 130. So I'm kind of feeling pretty confident that those two guys eclipse 60 to 70 yards each, possibly more. And then whatever Brashard Smith picks up as well, of course. So those two rushing props feel pretty advantageous to me. And then coming over here with the Eric Singleton train, a kind of a whopper. If you think he goes for 100 plus, you get plus 450. Now we had the anytime touchdown props like DK's pricing them awful. They're doing it in the NFL. It's awful. They're just raking over the coals. And last year in the early part of the CFB season, we got like some plus 400, plus 450 anytime touchdown props. Now we don't really get that. So this is a way to maybe look at a guy in Singleton who we think is going to blast off. 80 plus at plus 215, 70 plus receiving yards at plus 145. I like all of those numbers up to 100 there. Maybe sprinkle those into like a prop parlay. I will have those in the bet tracker as well as our betting Discord. And I have put a ton of season-long futures that we went over last Monday on the show. You can find those on the FTN Fantasy site as well and in the Discord. So that's pretty much the props that I'm looking at. Betting opportunities, post and just kind of mention it again. SMU minus 13.5 in the first half over on DraftKings. I feel like they're going to strike quickly. Again, things will slow down in the second half inevitably. Nevada may score some there, but they're going to be on their heels early on and giving us that minus 13.5. It looks like now DK's pushed it up to minus 14.5. So hopefully he got it yesterday when we posted it in the bet tracker, but that is still one that I'm heavily invested in. And then as well, New Mexico, which I can now get at plus 13.5 because I think they're going to cover. I'm actually pretty confident they're going to cover. That is it. I think that's everything wrapped up. A nice little bow. Again, back Saturday morning, 1 hour before lock to talk any, last minute lineup questions you may have, depth chart changes. There's always some kind of, crazy rumors going on Saturday morning. So we'll be covering all of that. Questions from Twitter, Discord, and YouTube. Before we head out, Jake, is there any, last things you want to talk about? And of course, wouldn't be a super show without you delivering us one of your patented, slate breaking lines for one of your favorite players of this particular slate.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess first thing is if anybody is going to be at the SMU game, if you want to report to us who that running back is that's taking those first team reps, that's always the juicy information to get, 20 minutes before kickoff and scramble to readjust your lineups. But yeah, no, I'm excited. It's a welcome feeling to have our early Saturday mornings to look forward to, a day of chaos and tilt and winning all the money. So with that said, probably won't be surprising. He's been a little bit of a theme of the show, but hopefully is just enough, off the radar as off the radar can be on a 3-game slate. But let's go RJ Maryland, 6 for 65 and 2 touchdowns.
I love it. That sounds like a line that he will hit for sure. All right, that'll do it for us. Thanks, everybody who supported the show tonight, watching live. Over 250 of you from mainly Twitter. We love it. You can find us next week, same time, same place on the FTN network, breaking down the week 1 slate, and then just a real quick kind of talk about with the content and how it's going to look. So we will have a article and show for every Saturday main slate. There will also be an article written by Jake for the late slate. So we'll have a breakdown there, late night slate in Discord, which we always kind of, gather about there. A lot of people burn out by then, but that's a big edge for us. And then during the week, any of those 2-3 game showdown type of stuff, that will all be changed to Discord content only. And then when they get to bigger slates and we get into bowl season, of course, we'll have written content for that. But there will be 2 super shows per week, multiple articles, and then breakdowns at minimum in the Discord for each and every slate. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. See you here on Saturday morning, 1 hour before lock. Week 0, it's here. Take care, everybody. Appreciate it, as always. Be